Stay with us while we have the next discussion, because we've been joined in the studio by the Conservative peer and former Chancellor Nigel Lawson. Welcome back to the Daily Politics. It's a mess over the customs union, isn't it, Nigel Lawson? And we've had at the weekend the Business Secretary, Greg Clark, saying he supports the idea of a customs partnership, that option is firmly back on the table. Otherwise, he says thousands of jobs are at risk. And we've got Boris Johnson saying it's a crazy idea.
Well, Boris is right. And of course, Greg Clark's remark about thousands of jobs being at risk is complete economic illiteracy. There are no jobs at risk at all. The fact is that there are a number of people who disagree with the idea of the United Kingdom leaving the European Union, disagree with Brexit, and they are trying to row back from the decision that was made by the British people, which was accepted by the British government, which was in the Conservative Manifesto, and also the remarks which Theresa May has made on a number of occasions, that we leave the customs union, we leave the single market.
Right, but we've just heard...
she also said, incidentally, very importantly, on a number of occasions, starting with Lancaster House, but on a number of subsequent occasions, that no trade deal is better than a bad deal. And it is quite clear that all this is becoming an increasingly bad, complex but bad deal, even if it can be negotiated. And indeed, that is the purpose of the European Union. And I understand that. I live in France, and they are concerned about the growth of anti-EU sentiment in France and Italy and many other countries on the continent. And so they want to ensure that we get a bad deal in order to deter anybody else from wanting to leave.
Right. Owen, what do you say to that?
Well, I find myself in the bizarre position of agreeing with both Greg Clark and Boris Johnson. Greg Clark is absolutely right that there are clearly thousands of jobs at risk as a result of Brexit. He was talking about the car industry, that he's clearly deeply worried, whether that's Ford in South Wales or Nissan and Toyota elsewhere. We already know that they are making all sorts of very serious noises about the way in which Brexit's going to hit their business. And if we have a no-deal situation, as Nigel just described, then of course the tariffs on cars leaving this country would be inordinately higher than they are. We're talking about a 20% increase in the price of cars. But Boris Johnson is also right that a customs partnership, as being described, is crackers.
Right.
Which is why we should simply stay in the customs union.
Do you want us to walk away then in that situation, Nigel Lawson?
I'll just address what Owen Smith has said. He has talked about the barriers there will be for British car exports onto the continent. I'm in favour of free trade. I don't want to see barriers. But if those barriers were to exist, then there would be similar barriers for continental cars coming to this country. And this is a massive market, and British motor manufacturers would clean up in the UK market.
So rather than having a customs partnership, would you rather we left without a deal?
I think that if we can, that it's possible that the max fac
that Lizzie was talking about,
technological device would work.
Right, but so when you listen to Steve Baker talking about the customs partnership and why it's a good idea, what do you think?
I don't think Steve did say it was a good idea.
He did. Well, he's explaining the benefits and how it would work, a customs partnership.
He explained how it would work, yes.
I mean, the government says that both of those options are absolutely workable. And Steve Baker was at pains to tell me that repeatedly.
Right, so is he selling out?
No, it's workable, but it is wholly undesirable. But anyhow, because the max fac thing, the technological thing is so much better.
Right, but how can it go on politically, Nigel Lawson, if you have got members of the Cabinet, key members of the Cabinet, like Boris Johnson, denouncing ideas that the government is putting forward as workable, like the customs partnership, as crazy, and you've got Greg Clark saying that that's the one we should go for?
Well, Greg Clark used, as I said, economically illiterate arguments to support it. What is needed is for Theresa May not to spend all her time trying to fudge issues and split the differences between different parts of the cabinet, which do exist. There's no doubt two ways about it.
But what should she do?
To show leadership.
What should she do?
She should show leadership. She should follow exactly what she said on the Lancaster House speech and on a number of subsequent.
And what does that mean? What does that mean? Should she get rid of Greg Clark?
No, it's nothing to do with that. She's stamping her leadership. If Greg Clark wanted to resign, but I don't think he does.
You say he's economically illiterate. Should he be the business secretary?
I think it is sad if you have a business secretary who is economically illiterate, but it may be that he is so emotionally involved in his European Union beliefs, his pro-EU beliefs, that has warped his judgment. That's possible.
Right, but he's representing Number 10 in the government's position, isn't he? If he's doing interviews over the weekend, that is the government's position.
Well, I don't think it is the government's position. The government's position is that this has not yet been rejected. The government's position is not to go 100% for this.
How do you know?
But anyhow,
how do you know?
It is clear.
Well, how's it clear if you've got the representative?
Look at what Boris Johnson has said, and the foreign secretary, with great respect, the foreign secretary, with great respect, is a more senior figure in any cabinet than the business secretary.
How likely do you think your side is going to win the argument over this? Because there is every signal that actually Theresa May could secure enough support in cabinet for the customs partnership. What would Boris Johnson do then?
You demean yourself by talking always about personalities. This is a major
Aren't they important?
issue. This is a major issue for our country. One of the biggest issues our country has faced for a very, very long time, and we have got to get it right. The people voted, and that needs to be accepted. It has been accepted ostensibly by Parliament on both parties,
right?
Labour Party and the Conservative Party. So we have to go ahead with that, and when we go ahead with it, I would like to have a free trade agreement with the European Union, but I don't think that is not on, and so we will have to, I suspect, fall back on WTO terms, which is the terms on which the rest of the world trades with the European Union and trades very successfully with the European Union.
Right. Nigel Lawson says we shouldn't talk about personalities, but actually that is what it has come down to, an argument within Cabinet at the very top of government about which way to go on this issue of the customs union, which is, in a sense, a proxy for how we are going to leave the EU. I mean, who do you think and which side do you think in the end will triumph and, to some extent, state how we'll leave?
Well, my view is that because this issue is so important, Nigel's right about that, and because the government and the Labour Party are so divided, what we need to do is, when we've got a clear idea of what is really on offer, not the sort of glib assertions still being offered by Brexiteers such as Nigel, when we've got a real idea of what it looks like, that's when the people should be given a chance to ratify the decision at the tail end of it. Because Nigel is not right that the EU trades with the rest of the world on WTO terms. They have 60-odd trade agreements with other parts of the world. He's not right that we would simply end up with protectionist barriers both ways in terms of our cars. We would have higher prices being paid by ordinary people for cars because our systems are so integrated in the production of cars across Europe. And nor is he right that we will be better off at the end of this process, because I think the economically literate evidence-based reality is that most economists, Nigel, you are out on a limb on this, most economists now can see that we'll be worse off at the end of the process. No, that's not the case. Especially if we leave without a deal.
That's not the case. And one of the ways in which, of course, we'll be much better off is we no longer have to pay the vast amount of money, the net £12 billion a year and rising.
We're going to be paying it
to the European. We don't have to. That is
billions.
That is that is a fraction of what we would have to pay. But even that, we're not obliged to pay. Theresa May has made it very clear that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, and not everything is agreed now. So that's only provisional. So it's a basic agreement, and it's an agreement, No, the OPR figures incidentally show the huge.
Well, Nigel Lawson, can I ask? Why is so much big pressure being put on Theresa May by people on your side of the argument? Why are so many, Jacob Rees-Mogg, yourself, other Brexiteers who are writing, putting her under this pressure?
Because they know they're losing the argument.
No, there are people on both sides of the argument who are expressing themselves. I think that the majority of the Conservative Party, but it's not the whole lot. There's a minority who passionately want to remain in the European Union, or at least have a Brexit in name only. And fundamentally we leave and become a colony of the European Union, so we accept everything about the European Union without having any say.
Do you think civil servants have had a big role to play in putting forward ideas like the customs partnership? People like Ollie Robbins?
Oh, of course. Look, the best documentary on how government works in this country. Is a programme called Yes, Prime Minister. And
it's true.
Sir Humphrey was a very powerful influence, and he had his own views, and he pushed it. And when a government is weak and divided, then the Sir Humphreys are even more important.
Right. And in the end, do you think if she does yield Theresa May to her civil servant in this case, that somebody like Boris Johnson will just have to take a stand?
No, I hope that she will not be so unwise as to do that. And I hope, as I said earlier, that she will show some leadership.
All right. Well, the journalist Quentin Letts has written a column today in the Daily Mail. He talks about the mood in the Conservative Party over the idea of a customs partnership. And he says if the Prime Minister tries this outrageous anti-democratic move, it's off with her head. Do you agree with him?
I don't know Quentin Letts. I mean, he entertains us by providing an intelligent commentary on political affairs. I don't think he is an arbiter of whether Prime Ministers stay or go.
But is that the mood in the Conservative Party on your wing? Is that what will happen?
As I said, I hope that Theresa May will realise that destiny is looking at her and she must show leadership. If she messes this up, it will be a disaster for the country. That's the thing that worries me. But it would also be a disaster for her.
Is it a moment of maximum danger for her?
It's a moment of danger, certainly. As Owen Smith pointed out, the Labour Party too is totally divided. Both parties are divided on this issue.
It's worth saying that while we're arguing about this here, the EU has shown little enthusiasm for either of these options. So it may all be rather academic, because at the moment they've referred to the customs partnership as magical thinking. Yeah. And also in terms of maximum facilitation, much of the technology that would be required for that to work hasn't actually been invented yet.
Right. That's an important point, that people talk about what sort of deal we should go for. When you're doing a deal with somebody, it's a question of what sort of deal you will get. And the point about falling back on no trade deal is that is something we can do. We cannot determine what deal we will get. And I believe the only deal which is gettable is a thoroughly bad one.
Nigel, what do you say, though, to your erstwhile colleagues in the Treasury who suggest in their so-called secret analysis they did that if we do go for your preferred option, we see over the next 15 years a reduction in our country's GDP of between 10 and 15%?
That is Treasury forecasts have been shown to be complete nonsense. The Project Fear. Do you remember Project Fear?
Well, before we get into a discussion, on Project Fear,
it's the Treasury. It's not the Tory Treasury. It is Project Fear. No, it is not. It is Project Fear.
All right, we're going to leave it there because last time Nigel Lawson called on the Chancellor to resign over some of this. Anyway, Lizzie, thank you very much for coming in, and Nigel Lawson for joining us too.
I'm in favour of Brexit, actually, because I'd rather be a poor master of my own fate than a rich servant of someone else's.